In the dead of night, a vicious blizzard descended upon Windridge, a tiny mountain town already teetering on the brink of isolation. Officer Mark Hayes tightened his collar against the biting wind, his breath a frosty plume as he glanced down at Rex, his faithful canine partner. Moments ago, a frantic call crackled over the radio, a faint, desperate bark heard somewhere beyond the tree line, near an abandoned farmhouse. Mark's heart pounded not for his own safety, but for whatever soul cried out in the storm's fury. In that instant, he knew this mission would test every ounce of courage, loyalty, and hope he and Rex had ever forged together. Before we continue, where are you watching from today? Comment below. Officer Mark Hayes had patrolled the snow-swept streets of Windridge for nearly a decade, yet nothing had prepared him for a storm like tonight's. The town lay nestled in a narrow valley, flanked by towering pines weighed down with heavy drifts, their branches creaking under nature's icy hand. Street lamps flickered, half buried in white, casting long, wavering shadows across deserted roads. Each gust of wind sounded like a low, mournful whisper, as if the mountain itself were lamenting some ancient grief. Mark's cruiser rumbled over a patch of ice, tires crunching through fresh powder. Beside him, Rex's 7-year-old German Shepherd with a coat the color of midnight leaned his head against the window, ears alert, nostrils flaring to catch any hint of scent. Mark reached down and ran a gloved hand along Rex's spine, feeling the steady thrum of his companion's muscles. In every mission before, Rex had led the way, tracking missing hikers, locating children lost in the woods, even sniffing out hidden dangers. Their partnership had begun years earlier, when Mark himself was still learning the ropes and Rex was a spirited pup, eager to please. Together, they had saved lives, lifted community spirits, and forged an unbreakable bond. Yet tonight, something felt different. The call had come through as a routine check-in. A local farmer reported hearing a dog bark faintly, muffled by howling winds, near the old McAllister farmhouse, an abandoned relic of tragedy. Years ago, the McAllister property had been the scene of an animal hoarding bust, dozens of malnourished dogs rescued from neglect. Many had found new homes, but rumors persisted of one dog who had slipped through the net, disappearing into the surrounding forest. Locals spoke of occasional howls, of footprints vanishing in snowbanks, but few dared to investigate. The farmhouse itself stood boarded up and forlorn, its windows dark and gaping like empty eye sockets. Icicles hung from the eaves like jagged teeth, and the front porch sagged under the weight of winter's wrath. Even in daylight, the place sent a chill through the bravest hearts. At night, during a blizzard, it felt alive with unseen watchers. Now, with the radio dispatcher repeating coordinates in Mark's ear, Rex sat upright, tail swishing the seat. Mark glanced at the HUD compass, then back at the swirling blizzard. Communication with dispatch was already spotty. Static crackled between his words. This was more than a lost pet, call it could be a life or death search. Mark inhaled, filling his lungs with the sharp tang of freezing air leaking through the door seal. They parked the cruiser a safe distance from the farmhouse, where the road gave way to deep snowdrifts. Rex shot forward, harness jingling, and Mark followed, flashlight beam cutting through the whiteness. The wind bit at his exposed cheek, and he found himself blinking snow from his lashes. Every step sank ankle deep. Every exhale formed a mini cloud around his face. The silence in the forest was broken only by the wind's howl and Rex's steady paw prints as they advanced. Mark's mind flickered to earlier days, his first meeting with Rex at the police academy's kennels. The dog's bright eyes and boundless energy, the late-night training sessions when neither man nor animal wanted to stop. He remembered the morning they graduated as partners, the ceremony marked by applause and hope. In those moments of reflection, Mark felt a familiar ache, the weight of responsibility for every life in danger, the fear of failing those who counted on him. He steeled himself, repeating a mantra: focus on the mission. Trust Rex. Never give up. Their path wound around the farmhouse's east side, where a collapsed fence and a yawning gap in the boards hinted at a makeshift entrance. The wind gusted through the darkness, scattering snow like grains of salt. Rex paused, nose to the ground, then emitted a low, questioning whine. Mark shone the flashlight at the ground. Deep tracks, paw shapes partially filled with new snow, lending toward a fallen barn door. His heart tightened. He crouched, pressing a gloved finger against the snow beside the tracks. The area was littered with footprints, some canine, some human. Shivering, Mark recalled the day he'd led the hoarding bust, the sorrow in the eyes of each rescued dog, the promise made to give them better lives. If one had survived here all these winters, It would be a miracle and a tragedy of neglect. Rex's whine turned into a soft bark, urgency rising. Mark rose, flashlight trembling in his grip. He followed Rex's gaze, a dark form slumped just inside the barn's threshold, barely visible. The beam revealed matted fur dusted with snow, ribs visible beneath an ashen coat. Rex sprang forward, barking with fierce affection, and Mark hurried after him, calling, "Easy, boy, easy." The dog lunged, nose nudging the motionless form, and Mark dropped to one knee, heart pounding against his chest. He reached out and felt a faint tremor beneath layers of frost. A soft whimper escaped the animal's throat, a plea for help. Mark's throat constricted, and he fought to steady his voice as he radioed dispatch. Suspect located. Male German, Shepherd mix, severely hypothermic. I'm moving him to the cruiser for warming. ETA back in 5 minutes. Rex pressed against the dog's side, offering warmth and comfort. Mark pulled off his outer jacket and wrapped it gently around the trembling survivor, whose eyes flickered open, confused, alarmed, but alive. In that moment, the storm's roar seemed to fade, replaced by a quiet reverence for life's fragility, and the bond between creatures who relied on each other to survive. Mark's internal monologue raced. You did it, Rex, you found him. We can bring him home. As Mark lifted the dog and cradled him in his arms, the wind gusted again, as if granting permission for their passage. Rex pressed close, nose nuzzling the rescued dog's ear, offering silent reassurance. Together, they turned back toward the cruiser, each step a testament to hope prevailing against the storm's fury. After a decade of storms, both literal and personal, Officer Hayes and Rex have found a lone soul fighting for life, yet the greatest challenge lies ahead as they race to safety, hearts pounding with urgency and hope. Long before the wind-whipped trees of Windridge bore witness to a desperate bark, in the blizzard, Officer Mark Hayes was forging his career on quieter winter mornings at the Academy's kennels. He still recalled the first time he met Rex, a lanky 6-month-old German shepherd with bright, curious eyes and an uncontainable exuberance. While other recruits struggled with basic obedience drills, Mark found a deeper connection in Rex's eager wag of the tail, the way the pup matched his pace as they circled the training yard. In those early days, Mark fought his own doubts, haunted by memories of a childhood dog he'd lost to illness, the ache of helplessness that had driven him to law enforcement. He vowed then that no creature under his care would ever suffer for lack of attention. As he taught Rex to heel, to stay, to track, he felt his own purpose aligned with the dog's singular focus, to serve and to save. Their first real test came during a spring blizzard. When a hiker vanished on Eagle Ridge Trail, the storm rolled in without warning, and by the time dispatch sounded the alarm, whiteout conditions had swallowed the path. Mark and Rex set out at dusk, the wind howling through their parkas, snow pelting their faces like icy shards. Hours passed with only the crunch of their boots and Rex's careful toe-steps marking their progress. Then, as Mark pivoted to reassure the dog, he caught sight of Rex's taut body, nose lowered to the ground. With a sharp bark, the dog bounded forward, leading Mark to a shallow ravine where the hiker lay semi-conscious, hypothermic, but alive. The rescue earned Mark but more importantly, it cemented the unspoken bond between man and dog, a bond built on trust, courage, and mutual reliance. Each had saved the other that night in spirit, if not in body. Back at the station, Mark often found himself replaying that rescue while watching Rex sleep, paws twitching as if chasing phantom scents. He wondered what ran through the dog's mind. Did he recall the terror of the hiker, the sensation of life returning under his gentle nudge? Sometimes, too, Mark felt Rex's gaze settle on him with quiet empathy, as though sensing the officer's lingering guilt over past failures, the domestic call where he'd arrived too late, the lost child whose laughter he never heard again. In those moments, the weight of responsibility pressed on Mark's chest, but Rex's steady presence offered a balm. Mark internalized a simple truth: the partnership was more than a job. It was a pact of devotion between two beings who had no choice but to trust one another utterly. Meanwhile, the McAllister farmhouse stood in silent testimony to a darker chapter of the community's past. 7 winters earlier, animal control had raided the property after neighbors reported constant barking and the stench of decay. Inside, officers discovered more than 60 dogs cramped into filthy cages, each animal skeletal, eyes wide with fear. The case made national headlines, and volunteers poured in to nurse the survivors back to health. Mark had been among those offering support, but the sight of so many lives hanging by a thread had lingered in his thoughts. The McAllister patriarch was convicted and imprisoned, and the farmhouse was sealed, condemned by the county. Yet whispers persisted that not every dog had been found. One rogue animal had slipped through a loose board during the raid, vanishing into the wilderness. Some locals dismissed this as rumor, but for Mark, the possibility haunted him, a creature born of neglect, surviving by instinct alone. Its fate unknown. On calmer nights, Mark drove past the empty farmhouse, headlights revealing broken windows and sagging porches. The image unsettled him, a reminder that neglect often leaves invisible scars. He sometimes imagined the lost dog's journey, how it trudged through desolate fields, scavenging for scraps, seeking warmth in hollow logs. He pictured the creature's first winter, when snow blinded its senses. Its second, when hunger hollowed its bones. Yet he also envisioned moments of resilience, a makeshift shelter beneath a fallen barn roof, a hidden spring where it lapped life-saving water. In his mind, the animal became both victim and survivor, a testament to life's stubborn will to endure. These reflections shaped Mark's approach to every call, infusing his work with empathy. He no longer saw rescues as police business alone. He saw them as moral imperatives owed to any creature who cried out in fear. When the radio dispatch crackled with news of a bark heard near the McAllister property, Mark felt a familiar surge of purpose. He and Rex had secured gear and set out without hesitation, cutting across drifted roads to reach the farmhouse's lonely silhouette. Now, as they pressed deeper into the storm's embrace, Mark sensed that the evening held echoes of old sins and fresh hope. His ribs ached with the cold, but his mind burned with anticipation. Would they find a survivor of the past tragedy, proof that neglect need not spell oblivion? Or would they discover only lifeless remains, a grim reminder of unforgiven neglect? Yet even in uncertainty, Mark found solace in Rex's steady gait beside him, each breath visible in the frigid air. Together, they carried the weight of memory and the promise of redemption into the heart of the tempest. As the wind's roar swelled, Mark reviewed their supplies: thermal blankets, medical kits, extra water for both himself and Rex. He tightened the pack straps and adjusted the collar on Rex's harness, feeling the dog brush against his side in reassurance. In that fleeting gesture, Mark tasted a spark of confidence. No matter what they faced inside the old barn or beyond the farmhouse threshold, they would face it together. Every step bridged past and present Mark's own journey from guilt to purpose, Rex's transformation from spirited pup to steadfast partner, and the McAllister dog's mysterious fate hanging in the balance. The farmhouse loomed ahead, dark and but within Mark's heart glowed a steadfast certainty that compassion could thaw the coldest of nights. Haunted by memories of past failure and drawn forward by unrelenting empathy, Mark and Rex now stand at the threshold of the farmhouse's hidden secrets, where shadows of neglect clash with the promise of salvation. The wind's fury redoubled as Officer Hayes and Rex pressed onward, each gust like a whip across open skin. Snow swirled in blinding sheets, transforming every familiar landmark into ghostly silhouettes. Mark's flashlight cut through the haze in a narrow, trembling beam, illuminating only the next 2 or 3 feet of unsteady path. Each step felt like wading through quicksand, boots sinking past the ankles. His respirations came in ragged bursts, visible plumes dissolving immediately in the frigid air. Yet despite the exhaustion and the bite of frost on his face, he refused. Too slow. Rex, too, kept pace, ears pinned back, nose low to the ground. Periodically he paused, body tense, tail flicking, zeroing in on sounds buried beneath the storm's roar. Their radio crackled intermittently, a lifeline to the station. That grew more static than signal. "Mark, do you read?" began dispatch, but was lost in a burst of white noise. Mark pressed the talk button, voice strained. "We're ahead of schedule, but visibility's near zero. Might have to switch to infrared." In another surge of static drowned him. He dropped the handset and focused on Rex's harness light, a faint glow in the swirling chaos. The dog's eyes shone with determination despite the fatigue etched in every line of his muzzle. Mark swallowed hard, tracing their course by memory and instinct. He recalled the approximate bearings to the barn entrance where they'd glimpsed the form of the stranded dog. Every minute counted. Hypothermia set in within moments at these temperatures. They skirted a fallen ridge of shale that scraped against Mark's thigh, tearing his uniform and chilling him further. Snow had piled in drifts so deep that Rex leaped while Mark stumbled. A flash of pain shot through Mark's ankle as he twisted it on hidden ice. He grimaced, but forced himself upright, wincing with each breath. He wrapped a gloved hand around Rex's harness ring, half supporting the dog while lending it direction. Rex didn't falter. His faith in Mark's leadership held him steady. Mark whispered assurances, though the words felt hollow in the void of the storm. Suddenly, Rex barked sharply an urgent, staccato call. Mark fumbled for his night vision, monocular, clicking it to life. The green-tinted world revealed the battered wall of an old agricultural shed, its boards split and sagging. Through a jagged gap, Mark spied movement, the shape of another canine crouched within, breathing raggedly. He exhaled a breath he didn't realize he'd held. "There," he said, voice hoarse. Rex lunged forward, thrusting into the darkness. Mark followed shoulder first through the broken boards, snow cascading like rain behind him. Inside, the temperature felt improbably colder, as if the shed's interior sucked warmth from the air. The rescued dog lay against a corner post, body curled in on itself. Its fur was matted with ice, each breath a trembling effort. Mark knelt, sweeping his jacket over the animal's shivering form. The dog's eyes flicked open, clouded, disoriented, and filled with equal parts relief and fear. Rex settled beside them, pressing close, nose gleaming in the night vision's sickly glow. Mark reached for the thermal blanket in his pack, hands numb as he struggled to wrap it around the dog. A low groan emitted from the animal's throat, half pain, half gratitude. Mark's heart pounded. He set to work checking for injuries. Paws frostbitten, ribs prominent beneath ice-sticken fur, and a small gash along the flank that leaked dark crimson into the snow-damp blanket. His breath hitched. There was no time for panic. Methodically, he tore antiseptic wipes from his kit, cleaning the wound while Rex pressed a warm muzzle to the dog's neck, lending body heat and reassurance. Outside, the storm battered the shed's planks. Each howl threatened to rattle them apart. Mark glanced at Rex. The dog's eyes betrayed fatigue but also unyielding loyalty. Mark patted him, finding a surge of resolve in the gesture. He signaled the need to move, and with all the strength he could muster, lifted the injured dog into his arms. The animal's weight was a leaden burden, but Mark welcomed it. It was a life to Siva promised to keep. Together, they retraced their steps into the tempest. Each footfall was agony, twisting ankles, sinking boots, and the constant dread that communications would fail completely. Mark's internal monologue raced. "Keep going. Don't let the storm win. Rex is counting on you." Rex stayed at his side, occasionally nudging Mark's arm, urging him onward. The path back to the cruiser stretched endlessly, but every heartbeat brought them closer to warmth, to safety, to hope. As the storm's wrath intensifies, Mark's body strains and Rex's energy wanes, but in their shared determination and compassion, they find the spark that could turn a frozen tragedy into a beacon of survival. Mark braced himself against the wind as he laid the injured dog on the back seat of the cruiser, blankets cocooning the animal's shivering form. Yet even as he administered, first aid massaging the dog's frostbitten paws and whispering reassurances, his mind drifted back to earlier failures. The creeping guilt settled in his chest like a weight, the same guilt that gnawed at him when he recalled the night he arrived late to save a puppy caged in a garage fire. He could still see the tiny skeleton huddled in the corner, eyes reflecting agony and abandonment. That evening, he had vowed never again to let time slip through his fingers. But every co-out carried the sting of doubt. What if this time, too, he failed? What if the dog's injuries were too severe, or the storm claimed its life before dawn? A distant groan caught his attention. The rescued dog, now cocooned in blankets, lifted his head and emitted a soft whimper. Mark hurried back to his side. The dog's eyes, once clouded with fatigue, now fixed intently on Mark. He seemed to beckon, as though urging them onward. Mark crouched, voice gentle. "I know, pal. I hear you." He placed a gloved hand on the dog's head, feeling the rapid thrum of its pulse. Despite the thaw in the wind, the night remained perilous, but the animal's plea was clear. Survival demanded they press forward. He glanced at Rex, whose stance shifted from restfulness to readiness. The canine's eyes tracked the rescued dog's gaze toward a narrow gap in the blind's planked wall. Through that breach, the storm raged anew. Mark nodded slowly, understanding the unspoken plan. They would leave this haven behind and brave the final stretch together. Standing, Mark surveyed the scene. 3 lives bound by shared struggle, 2 dogs and 1 man. Each drew strength from the others, their spirits intertwined by necessity and compassion. He pulled a final energy bar from his pack and tore it in half, offering pieces to Rex and then to the rescued dog. Both accepted the ration, their teeth crunching with renewed vigor. Mark savored the simple act. Food in the belly was as potent a remedy as any medicine. He resecured his pack, slinging it over his shoulder, and checked his gear, thermal wraps, extra water, the radio handset now crackling with faint life. The static was punishing, but it meant connection. They had to move before the lull ended. Mark flicked off the lantern, plunging them into darkness, lit only by the small LEDs on Rex's harness and the reflective safety stripes on Mark's uniform. As they emerged, the wind struck them full force. Mark tightened his grip on Rex's harness, the luminous patch staring back like a promise. The rescued dog huddled close, relying on Mark's steady stride to guide him. Each step out of the blind felt like plunging into each chapter of their shared ordeal. The biting cold, the disorientation, the terror of abandonment. But with every footfall, they carried with them the ember of hope reignited by that momentary shelter. Mark's thoughts turned inward again. Acknowledging the paradox of such respites, they offered both relief and a poignant reminder of vulnerability. In the blind's stillness, awareness sharpened. He understood how thin the line lay between salvation and succumbing. This rest had fortified their bodies and spirits, but it also warned that comfort was fleeting. He resolved to carry that clarity forward, to honor the fragile lives in his charge by navigating the storm's next phases with unyielding focus. Their path led them down a shallow ridge, where snow plumes spat from hidden crevices. Rex moved, as though he knew Mark's intent, his head lowered, strides measured. The rescued dog followed, trusting in the tandem's rhythm. For a brief instant, the storm's howl dimmed in Mark's ears, replaced by the steady crunch of snow under boot and paw. He found a meditative calm in that repetition, a mantra of perseverance. Each crunch was a syllable in their shared promise. We endure, we prevail, we live. Behind them, the blind faded into the whirling white. Ahead, the dark silhouette of the farmhouse beckoned a final hurdle before reaching safety. Mark inhaled the cold air, steeling himself. He felt the surging tide of adrenaline settle into resolute determination. In that still heartbeat between reprieve and resurgence, he whispered to himself, "This storm will not defeat us. We are stronger than the gale, gentler than the freeze." With that affirmation, the trio pressed on, leaving behind the brief haven of the hunting blind and the storm's domain, united by empathy, fortified by hope, bound for whatever awaited at journey's end. In the eye of the storm, a fleeting refuge rekindles hope for Officer Hayes, Rex, and their rescued companion. Yet, as the wind returns, they steel themselves for the final push toward safety, hearts bound by newfound resilience. The blizzard intensified as Officer Hayes, Rex, and their rescued companion pressed onward toward the station. Wind gusts swirled like white tornadoes, tearing at uniforms and turning breath to ice upon exhalation. Mark felt the first prickle of frostbite along his exposed cheek, a burning numbness that spread beneath his skin. His boots, already soaked from wading through knee-high drifts, now clung to his feet like lead weights. Every step became an act of will against the storm's ferocity. Rex trudged beside him with unwavering focus, though his gait had lost some of its earlier spring. The rescued dog wrapped in Mark's thermal blanket stumbled behind, each breath ragged and labored. Mark measured their progress by the dim glow of the station's distant floodlight, barely visible through the swirling snow. Each time the light blinked behind a passing snow plume, Mark's heart leaped with hope and sank the next instant as the beacon vanished again. He pressed a gloved hand over his radio, attempting to relay their position. Static sputtered through the handset, then silence. A pang of panic stabbed at him. Without communication, they were completely isolated. He suppressed the fear, forcing his mind back to immediate tasks, monitoring the rescued dog's breathing, scanning the path ahead, steadying his own legs. "Focus," he chanted internally. Focus on each step. As they descended into a shallow ravine, the wind funneled with even greater force. Snow rifles tore across the surface in stinging arcs, finding the smallest gaps in clothing and armor. Mark's vision blurred, each eye blink fracturing the landscape into jagged shards of white and gray. He recalled the hour before dawn, when he'd first heard that bark, the primal, desperate sound that had set this mission in motion. Now the wind had co-opted that cry, amplifying it into a mournful howl. His heart ached with the weight of responsibility. If he failed, another life would slip through his grasp. Rex stumbled, paw raised, then pressed on, determined to guide them. Mark cuffed his own left hand around the dog's harness, adjusting his hold to give more support. He scanned the ground for hidden obstacles, tree roots, ice patches, shallow creeks forming under the new snow. One wrong step here could send them sprawling into a hidden ravine. His internal monologue plummeted into a flashback of the Eagle Ridge rescue, the sharp snap of a branch underfoot, the sudden snap of a hiker's leg. He had rallied then, tending wounds by moonlight. He could do it again, he told himself. He had to. Their path rose toward a narrow saddle between two hills. Here the storm seemed to crown its power, whipping snow into a solid wall that vibrated against Mark's chest. He crouched slightly, reducing wind resistance, and whispered coaxing words to Rex, though the dog could barely hear. Every inhalation felt like breathing shards of glass. He fought the urge to look around in desperation. Instead, he fixed his gaze on the faint outline of the station, imagining its warmth. It felt unreal, like a mirage in an icy desert. Keep moving. One foot in front of the other. Hours seemed to pass, each indistinguishable from the last. The rescued dog's whimpers grew weaker, its paws dragging through the snow as if weighted by lead. Mark crouched beside it, pressing his coat closer around its shoulders, sharing body heat. He murmured, "Stay with me, buddy, stay with us." His voice cracked under the strain, but he could not afford despair. He scanned the sky, where heavy clouds swallowed any hint of moonlight. In that darkness, time felt suspended, every second stretched taut with urgency. Rex's panting grew labored, the canine's sides heaving with effort. His brown eyes, so trusting and fierce earlier, now clouded with exhaustion. Mark knelt to cradle Rex's face in his hands, gauging the dog's temperature. The pads of Rex's paws were raw, cold to the touch. Mark's chest tightened at the sight. He had to protect this partner who had never wavered. A memory of their academy days surfaced, the pride in Rex's first successful centrail recovery. The jubilant bark that had echoed through the kennel yard. Mark pressed his forehead to Rex's, sharing warmth and silent vow. "We finish this together." Just then, a sudden howling crack rent the air as a loose branch, weighted by ice, snapped and fell onto the path ahead. Mark barely diverted to avoid impact, the sound ricocheting like thunder in his ears. He steadied himself against the trunk of a lean fir, assuaging the surge of adrenaline. The rescued dog whimpered and Rex flinched, hackles raised. Mark's pulse pounded, his breath ragged. Each threat in this frozen wilderness felt amplified. A simple slip could spell disaster. He swallowed back rising panic, focusing on the rhythm of the dog's breathing to calm both himself and his companions. Minutes later, they reached a shallow creek crossing, its water fast and hidden beneath moans. Mark steadied Rex and the rescued dog on opposite banks, using his body as a human bridge. Snow seeped through his jacket as he knelt to test each step. He heard the thin crack of ice beneath his weight, urging haste. He carried the rescued dog across first, sliding on his knees as slush soaked his uniform. Rex followed more nimbly, reluctant to leave Mark's side. Standing on the opposite shore, Mark felt the icy water seep into his marrow. Yet as he lifted the dog into sleet-laden air, he sensed a surge of triumph. They were closer than ever to shelter. A final stretch remained, a mile-long trail that wound through dense stands of spruce and fir. The storm's eye, if it existed, found them here, centering its wrath on this narrow corridor. Snowdrifts towered waist-high, and the only sign of the path was Rex's faint paw prints. Mark leaned on Rex's harness ring, letting the dog absorb some of his weight. The rescued dog shivered against his hip, too weak to struggle. Despite his fatigue, Mark felt a flicker of exhilaration. This was the crucible that tested their bond, and they were forging their salvation with each advancing step. As they neared the station's chain-link fence, Mark felt the ground level before him, signaling the end of the forest. The fence loomed like a barrier between life and oblivion. He heard the drone of the generator powering the station's lights and heaters, proof that warmth awaited beyond. But as he reached for the latch, his elbows struck the chain link, sending a shock of pain through his numb arm. Metal cut through his jacket and scraped his skin. He hissed and staggered back. Rex barked, low and insistent, as if urging Mark to press forward despite the injury. The rescued dog whimpered, licking Mark's hand in empathy. Regaining his balance, Mark swallowed a cry of pain and leaned heavily on the fence. He dug his fingers into the metal, anchoring himself. He brushed the cut with snow impure but cold and wrapped a bit of cloth from his shirt around it. Blood seeped through, but the sting reminded him he was alive. He turned to Rex and the rescued dog and said, "Almost there. Almost safe." A surge of hope coursed through him, fueling his legs for one final push. In that moment, the storm's howl seemed to subside, offering a final challenge. Endured the pain, overcome the freezing. Wind crossed the threshold into the warmth of safety. Mark squared his shoulders, lifted the rescued dog, and pressed through the fence, dragging both himself and the canines across the boundary that separated peril from refuge. The station's lights embraced them, the frosted windows glowing like lanterns of salvation. Mark exhaled a long, shuddering breath, while Rex collapsed gratefully against his legs. The rescued dog whimpered once more, then nestled into Mark's arms, eyes closing as warmth radiated through his chilled body. With limbs numb and spirits tested by the storm's second onslaught, Mark and Rex summon every ounce of resolve to breach the final barrier, knowing that beyond the fence lies the sanctuary they've fought so fiercely to reach. Dawn had not yet broken when the radio buzzed through the station's early morning quiet. The rescued dog, now named Jasper, rested in a heated kennel under veterinary care. Officer Hayes straightened his uniform, exhaustion still heavy in his bones, but his mind snapped alert at the dispatcher's words. Another faint bark, this time from deeper within the McAllister property, possibly from the barn's loft. Before he could consider rest, Mark found himself back in the cruiser, Rex riding shotgun as if already braced for action. In that moment, the line between relief and resolve blurred. There could be dozens waiting to be found, and he felt an almost obsessive need to finish what they'd started. No more left behind, his internal mantra pressed. Not on my watch. The storm had eased to a steady flurry by the time they cut through Windridge's outskirts, headlamps carving twin beams into swirling snow. The farmhouse's silhouette rose ahead, skeletal against the gray sky. Wood shingles hung loose from the roof, and every shutter rattled like a hollow throat. Mark parked, closer than before, feeling his heart drum at the memory of their previous approach. Rex bolted out the door, prancing in place, nostrils flaring at the scent of deeper secrets. Mark exhaled, watching snow plume around Rex's muzzle, and squared his shoulders. The storm's residual cold bit at his exposed face, but adrenaline flared warmer than any heater. Their path skirted the collapsed fence, then led past the old hunting blind where they'd briefly sheltered. Mark paused, glancing at the warped planks. Inside, he'd almost allowed hope to settle, yet here, on the boundary between past respite and present urgency, he sensed the full weight of what lay ahead. He knelt to rub Rex's harness, rereading the tag that hung from it, partner. Those 6 letters reminded him of every life they'd saved together, every breath reclaimed from loss. Rex sat quietly, eyes fixed on the barn door. That stillness spoke more eloquently than any bark. Mark stepped through the yawning entrance, flashlight beam flickering over rotted beams and scattered straw. The air felt stale, heavy with the musk of animal sweat and neglect. Jasper's earlier whimpers had hinted at company, but inside the barn's belly, it was eerily silent. Mark swallowed against a surge of doubt, memories of Jasper's near-death clenched in his chest. Could his senses deceive him again? He followed the stairs to the loft, each wooden rung groaning under his weight, the wind's howl drifting through cracks. Rex's paws thudded behind him, and Mark imagined the animal's heart pounding in unison with his own. Halfway up, Mark paused, recalling the day Jasper had collapsed in the snow. Frost creeping through his fur. He closed his eyes for a heartbeat, picturing the low whine that had galvanized them forward. That bond between rescuer and rescued had become a web of compassion, drawing him back into the barn's shadowed depths. Opening his eyes, Mark pressed on, scouring the loft's gloom for any sign of movement. Dust motes danced in his flashlight halo, and the wind moaned through broken windows, shaping phantom barks in the air. A sudden rustle echoed from behind a stack of wooden crates. Mark's breath caught. He crouched beside Rex, who bristled, hackles high. Together they edged forward, light revealing a small gap in the loft wall. Faint whimpers drifted through. Mark's chest tightened there. It was that fractured plea for help, so faint he almost doubted it. He elbowed aside a splintered plank, revealing 3 trembling shapes huddled together. Puppies, barely more than weeks old, their fur matted, and spindly bodies dwarfed by the rough planks. Mark's throat constricted at the sight. Rex inched forward, nose quivering as he sniffed the fragile litter. One puppy tried to stand, wobbling, then sank onto its belly with a pitiful squeak. Mark scooped it into gloved hands, feeling its frail heartbeat flutter like a frightened songbird. He wrapped it in a thermal blanket from his pack, sliding it against his chest for warmth. Behind him, Rex gently lifted another puppy by the scruff, careful not to harm its fragile neck. Mark exhaled a breath tinged with relief and renewed purpose. Yet the flicker of hope was tempered by urgency. They had to move quickly before the barn's ancient timbers collapsed or the temperature plunged further. He loaded the first puppy into a spare carrier from the cruiser, then gathered the second and third. Their tiny bodies fit snugly against Rex's warmth, and Mark found tears stinging his eyes at the scene's bittersweet beauty. These lives, born into neglect, had clung to survival through sheer instinct. Now, he and Rex were the bridge to a new beginning. He whispered, "We've got you. You're safe now," though his voice cracked. From somewhere further back, another whimper rose soft, yet unmistakable. Mark looked up. Shadows shifted beyond the loft's far corner. Determined. He lifted the carrier containing the first 3 puppies and edged toward the source. Rex stayed at his side, alert, ready to intercept any collapsing floorboard. The wind's howl seemed to recede, replaced by the scuttling of tiny paws. Mark knelt, shifting a broken beam aside to reveal 2 more puppies, curled tight. Their eyes had never opened, and their innocence struck him with fresh force. With utmost care, he gathered them, counting silently until 5 warm bodies filled his arms, each so light they might slip through his fingers. The roar of the wind returned, rattling the barn's frame, as if challenging Mark to defy nature's wrath. He rose, bracing a hand against the wall to steady himself. His other arm bore the weight of fragile hope. His internal monologue trembled between elation and fear. "You're almost there. Keep them together. Don't let the storm take you now." Rex nudged Mark's elbow, urging movement, and the pair retraced their steps down the creaking stairs. Every floorboard threatened collapse, every step risked disaster. But the puppy's soft whimpers urged speed. Halfway down, Mark slipped on a slick rooftop shard, sending him careening toward a loose railing. Reflexively, Rex lunged, nipping Mark's jacket and anchoring him. Mark's heart pounded as he regained balance, clutching the puppies tighter. The storm's fury outside seemed to applaud the near disaster, a reminder that rescue often teeters on a knife's edge. Mark pressed on, heedless of his own shaken nerves. The puppies, so trusting, leaned into Rex's warmth, panting softly. Emerging into the open, Mark staggered through the gate, Rex at his heel and puppies cradled against chest and side. The station's floodlights burned brightly now, painting the swirling snow in harsh relief. Volunteers rushed forward with carriers and blankets, rushing the puppies to safety. Mark sank to one knee, his breath shallow, tears mingling with frost on his cheeks. He laid each puppy gently into waiting arms, watching as warmth flooded their tiny bodies. Rex sat beside him, ears drooping, eyes reflecting both fatigue and triumph. Mark reached out and stroked Rex's muzzle, voice hushed. "You did it, boy. You brought them home." He felt the weight of all they'd endured, the storm's rage, his own fears, the haunting memories marshaled in the barn's gloom transform into a surge of gratitude. In that crucible moment, he realized the true climax wasn't merely the act of rescue, but the collective leap from despair to hope, as the first rays of morning filtered through snow-laden clouds. The puppies stirred weak tails thumping, tentative whines of trust. Volunteers murmured encouragement, and the station's warmth seeped into their bones. Mark stood, shoulders squared against exhaustion, and surveyed the scene, 5 fragile lives safe, Jasper recovering, and Rex resting at his side. The storm had tested every fiber of his being, yet here, amid shivering but surviving creatures, Mark felt something bloom inside him, affirmation of purpose. A testament to empathy's power. With the farmhouse's hidden litter now cradled in safety, Mark faces the daunting aftermath of winter's cruelty. But the true test lies ahead as he and Rex guide these fragile lives toward healing and hope. Morning light filtered weakly through frosted windows as Officer Mark Hayes stepped into the warmth of the Windridge Station's makeshift recovery room. The storm had finally relented, its howling fury replaced by a brittle hush that clung to the world outside. Inside, the atmosphere pulsed with quiet relief and gentle activity. Volunteers, in heavy parkas, bustled around heated crates, offering water bowls and soft towels. Jasper, the first dog rescued from the barn, lay on a raised cot beside a portable heater, eyes half-lidded and tail flicking in contentment. 5 tiny puppies, rescued in the loft's final moments, huddled together under infrared lamps, their fragile bodies slowly absorbing life-giving warmth. Mark paused at the door, letting the scene wash over him. His uniform was still dusted with snow, his cheeks pink from the cold, but his heart felt light, a buoyancy unfamiliar after days of relentless peril. He crossed the room silently, each step echoing a promise fulfilled, no soul left behind in the storm's merciless grip. Rex followed at his heel, paws clacking softly on the linoleum floor. The canine's eyes glowed with a mixture of pride and exhaustion, whiskers wet with condensation from his own panting breath. Mark knelt beside Rex and ran a hand through the dog's fur, feeling the steady reassurance of muscle and warmth. "We did it," he whispered. "All of us." He turned his attention back to the recovering animals. A volunteer approached with a chart detailing each animal's condition. Jasper's vitals were stabilizing. Frostbite limited to his ears and paws, wounds cleaning up nicely. The puppies, though weak, had begun to suckle from a bottle of restorative formula. Mark scanned the notes, relief flooding his chest as he absorbed each improvement. Yet beneath the joy lay a deeper awareness of the work still to come, a path from rescue to rehabilitation that would demand unwavering commitment. He had seen too many stories end at survival. Tonight, he vowed, these lives would be guided toward thriving futures. Drawing a ragged breath, Mark stepped outside for a moment of solitude. The world beyond the station lay buried beneath drifts of glinting snow, the sky a pale wash of dawn. He inhaled the crisp air, memories stirring of earlier rescues, the nighttime call on Eagle Ridge, the hiker's grateful eyes, the domestic bust where terrified dogs emerged blinking into daylight. Each moment a thread woven into the tapestry of their shared mission. He allowed himself a rare moment of introspection, the weight of responsibility he carried, the moral compass that compelled him to act, and the vulnerability that made courage necessary. In that quiet dawn, he acknowledged that heroism was not absence of fear, but the choice to advance despite it. Inside again, Mark found Rex resting on a thick blanket, head drooping onto his paws. Mark crouched and gently rolled the blanket back, revealing a pristine patch of harness where the word partner gleamed. He placed a hand there, inhaling the familiar scent of dog and snow, and steadfast loyalty. He thought of the nights, trials, the barn's collapsing shadows, the puppy's fragile squeaks, the storm's relentless assault, and realized that the true resolution lay not in a single climactic moment, but in the ripple of compassion that now radiated through the community. Every volunteer who braved sub-zero temperatures, every veterinarian offering after-hours care, every donor sending blankets or food had become part of a larger story, one of hope, resurrected amid the coldest despair. Mark rose and approached Jasper's crate. The dog's amber eyes flickered open, recognition softening into gratitude. He nuzzled the bars, tail thumping weakly. Mark untied a bandage, checking the healing wounds, and offered a gentle scratch behind the ear. Jasper's fur, matted and dull upon rescue, now gleamed with renewed vitality. In that simple touch, Mark felt the culmination of every sacrifice. Every sleepless hour, a testament that life, when met with empathy, could flourish again. He murmured, "Keep fighting, boy, I've got you." Shifting focus to the puppies, Mark watched as one small brindle pup tentatively rose on shaky legs, sniffing the air as though tasting freedom for the first time. A volunteer cheered softly, coaxing the pup back to its siblings with a gentle voice. The scene reminded Mark of childhood summers spent chasing fireflies with Tango, his family collie, before illness stole the dog away. He swallowed a lump in his throat and blinked rapidly, choosing gratitude over grief. Tango's memory had driven him to this life. Now, in these tiny survivors, he sensed a full circle, the continuity of compassion across generations and species. Volunteers began transferring Jasper and the puppies into secure cages lined with deep bedding, preparing them for transport to foster homes and rehabilitation centers. Mark oversaw each transition, ensuring every crate was labeled with medical notes and care instructions. He spoke with relief workers, sharing insights on animal behavior under extreme stress, how to introduce the rescues to quiet music, the importance of gradual resocialization, the recommended feeding schedules. His expertise, honed over years of service alongside Rex, transformed the station into a hub of coordinated compassion. As the final puppy was placed in a volunteer's arms, Mark turned to Rex. The dog rose and ambled forward, pressing his muzzle against Mark's hand. In that contact lay volumes of unspoken dialogue, gratitude, mutual trust, shared triumph. Mark crouched and pressed his forehead to Rex's, the heat from his skin seeping through Rex's thick coat. He thought of every night spent training, every drill where Rex had learned to follow his scent, every life they had saved together. He realized that this partnership transcended duty. It was a testament to the profound bond that could exist between human and animal, a bond that elevated both to acts of quiet heroism. With the rescue operation winding down, the station's Team gathered for a debrief. Mark addressed the group, voice steady. Tonight, we witnessed the power of unity between man and beast, between strangers bound by compassion. These dogs were abandoned, forgotten in a storm that mirrored life's harshest trials. But together, we retrieved them, healed them, and now will ensure they find loving homes. Remember, our work doesn't end at rescue. It continues in every foster home, every adoption, every community where these animals bring joy and hope. He paused, meeting each volunteer's gaze. Thank you for standing in the cold so they could stand in the light. As the group dispersed, Mark felt a gentle hand on his shoulder. The station's chief veterinarian, Dr. Alina Ramirez, offered him a warm smile. You did good, Officer Hayes. These animals have a real chance now because of you and Rex. Mark nodded, humility and pride intertwining. He replied, we did it together. Rex drove me forward when I doubted myself. We'll rest tonight, but tomorrow, we begin the next chapter. Later, as dusk settled across Windridge with a soft blanket of fresh snow, Mark returned to the kennel. The crates stood empty, the rescued dogs had been driven to their new foster placements earlier in the day. In their wake remained the faint echo of barks and whimpers, a memory of lives reclaimed. Mark paused before the row of stalls, powerfully aware of the hollow space that now brimmed with possibility. He let the silence speak for a moment, a tribute to absence and anticipation. Turning away, Mark stepped outside and looked up at the clear night sky, stars glinting like distant lanterns. The wind was gone, leaving only the hush of snowfall on pine needles. He inhaled deeply, filling his lungs with renewed purpose. Rest well, he whispered to the night, though he knew sleep would not come easily. His dreams would carry images of frost and fear, and of 5 tiny hearts revived by warmth. In that restless promise, he found solace, that every bark in the night, however weak, was a plea for connection, and that connection, once forged, could echo through countless dawns, with the rescued pack safe and the community rallied around their care. Mark and Rex stand at the threshold of renewal, yet the journey toward lasting healing and belonging has only just begun. In the soft glow of the station's lamps, Officer Hayes found himself pausing at the threshold of the recovery ward, gazing at the array of crates that had sheltered lives reclaimed from the storm's merciless grip. The journey from that first trembling bark to this moment had been a crucible of fear, pain, and unwavering resolve. He reflected on how each act of compassion, tucking a trembling puppy into a blanket, wrapping Jasper's frostbitten ears with gentle care, had rippled outward, touching everyone involved. Volunteers who had raced through blinding snow, veterinarians who worked through the night, neighbors who donated supplies, all shared a part in these animals' revival. In acknowledging this collective effort, Mark felt humility mingle with pride. The rescue had transcended a lone hero's tale, becoming a tapestry woven by an entire community bound by empathy. As he walked between the cages, fresh straw lined the bottom of each kennel, and the rescued dogs stirred with tentative curiosity, Jasper stretched and yawned, then trotted over when Mark's hand appeared at the bars, offering a warm greeting. The puppies, now energetic enough to nuzzle and play, tumbled over one another as they explored their temporary home. Watching them, Mark contemplated the therapeutic thread that animal companionship wove through human hearts. He remembered the solace he found as a child in Tango's quiet presence, and he saw that same quietude blossoming now in the eyes of those who came to volunteer. In saving these dogs, they had saved pieces of themselves, moments of joy knitted into hours of routine, the healing power of unconditional trust. Yet reflection also carried a trace of sorrow. A part of Mark's mind lingered on the night's hardships, the shards of ice that bit at skin and fur, the ache of fatigue that threatened to buckle resolve, and the darker ache of knowing how close they came to failure. In those depths, he recognized the dual nature of empathy. It demands vulnerability as much as it offers connection. To love is to expose oneself to the risk of loss. And Mark had felt that sting keenly as he carried Jasper from the barn and cradled each puppy against his chest. But he understood that without the willingness to feel that risk, the bright rewards of compassion, the wagging tails, the tentative licks, the quiet moments of mutual understanding could never be realized. This insight reinforced his commitment to continue standing in the cold for every bark unheard, every life teetering on the edge of oblivion, looking beyond the station walls. Mark envisioned a future where these animals would flourish. He pictured Jasper's confident gait as he stretched his legs in a foster home's backyard, and he imagined the puppies chasing sunbeams across living room floors. He thought of families opening their hearts to these survivors, offering second chances that would rewrite their narratives from neglect to belonging. In that vision, Rex's own journey stood parallel, from spirited academy pup to battle-hardened partner, now transitioning into a mentor role for younger K9 South, who would one day follow in his pawprints. Mark saw in Rex's patient guidance the blueprint for the bond he hoped to nurture between humans and animals, a relationship rooted in trust, sustained by compassion, and elevated by shared purpose. As he prepared to brief the next shift, Mark carried with him a deeper understanding of his own motives. His career had begun with a vow to protect and serve human lives. Over the years, that mandate had expanded to include those without voices or ballots. Each rescue had gradually reshaped his conception of duty. It was not merely a legal obligation, but a moral calling to defend the vulnerable, regardless of species. In every wagging tail, and in every tremble of fear, overcome, he found affirmation that empathy was the most potent force at his disposal. He resolved to advocate for stronger animal welfare initiatives in Windridge, a network of trained volunteers, stocked emergency kennels, and routine well-being checks that would ensure no bark went unheard in future storms. Inside his mind, the paradox of heroism had settled into clarity. True bravery blossomed not from the absence of fear but from the choice to press forward despite it. Mark thought of the moment Rex had snapped the railing and steadied him, and of the puppy's soft whimpers urging him onward, down treacherous stairs. Those recollections underscored a simple truth. Survival was a collaborative endeavor. In that collaboration, the boundary between rescuer and rescue dissolved. Each party offered something vital: courage in the face of adversity, compassion amid suffering, and the capacity to believe in a future unmarked by past trauma. As dusk settled and the station's bustle waned, Mark found Rex leaning against his leg, eyes drooping but content. He knelt and pressed his forehead to Rex's, the familiar warmth settling around him like a benediction. In that silence, he expressed gratitude for every moment they had shared: training runs in sunlit fields, tense calls in the dead of night, and the quiet aftermath of each rescue when they stood together, hearts brimming with both relief and hope. This bond, forged in adversity, would guide them through whatever challenges loomed ahead. Serving as a living testament to the transformative power of loyalty, Mark rose and turned to the empty kennels where the rescued pack had once huddled. Though the crates were vacant, their impact lingered in the station's renewed sense of purpose, a palpable warmth born of lives saved. He placed a hand against the cool metal of a cage, whispering, "Thank you, not to the empty crate but to the animals whose presence it had briefly held, and to every person who had transformed concern into action." He knew that while this chapter had drawn to a close, the story of empathy and resilience would continue in homes across Windridge, woven into daily routines and budding friendships. Now, as the station settled into quiet again, Mark paused at the door and looked back one last time. The journey ahead was not merely about emergencies and rescues. It was about cultivating a culture where compassion was instinctive and vigilance unwavering. He stepped into the night, feeling the crisp air on his face and carrying with him the echo of a weak bark that had once been lost to the storm, and now resonated as a clarion call for hope. After reading this section, how do you hope the bond between Officer Hayes, Rex, and their rescued companions will continue to grow? Comment below and share your vision. Amid the calm after winter's rage, Officer Hayes and Rex stand united in empathy, battling the shadows of past neglect with newfound purpose. They prepare to shepherd their rescued friends toward a future woven by trust and compassion. As autumn's first golden light filtered through the pines surrounding Windridge, Officer Hayes rose before dawn to check on Rex and the Fosters. The 5 puppies, now named Ember, Willow, Cedar, Birch, and Maple, had thrived under foster care, their tiny squeaks of contentment greeting him at the kennel door. Jasper bounded forward, tail wagging, sharing in the morning ritual of pats and praise. Mark inhaled the crisp air, letting the scent of pine needles and fresh crops remind him that every season offered new beginnings. He watched as Willow tumbled over Cedar in a burst of playful energy, the siblings' antics chasing away any lingering shadows of the blizzard's fury. In their lively barks and careful investigations of the grass, Mark recognized life's resilience. Even the coldest storms yield to the warmth of nurturing hearts. The community response had been nothing short of extraordinary. Local families entered into a shared covenant of care, volunteering to transport the survivors to veterinary appointments, crafting cozy beds from donated blankets, and organizing weekend playdates for socialization. Mark attended each gathering, observing meticulously as the puppies learned to trust human hands, to greet strangers with wagging tails instead of wary eyes. Volunteers snapped photographs Ember's first tentative lap around a backyard. Jasper's triumphant sprint along a forest trailland shared them on social media with the hashtag #WINDRIDGE rescue. Each post ignited ripples of compassion far beyond the town's borders, inspiring shelters in neighboring counties to launch their own winter readiness plans. Mark marveled at the momentum. A single bark in a blizzard had awakened a network of empathy that promised to shelter countless lives in seasons yet to come. One crisp morning, Mark escorted Rex and Jasper to the Windridge Elementary School's annual Reading with Dogs program. Kindergartners perched on colorful mats, their curious faces alight as Mark introduced the concept of kindness toward all creatures. Rex lay patiently by his side as a small girl named Mia gingerly ran her fingers through Jasper's soft coat, her voice trembling with excitement as she read aloud from a picture book about a lost pup finding a home. In Mia's clear-eyed wonder, Mark saw the future of his mission, cultivating empathy in young hearts so that no bark would ever go ignored. As the session concluded, the children's applause echoed through the gymnasium, bridging generations in a celebration of compassion. Behind the scenes, Mark worked with the town council to secure funding for an annual Blizzard Watch initiative and emergency response protocol pairing officers, volunteers, and animal control with pre-positioned relief supplies and warming stations. He collaborated with Dr. Ramirez to develop training modules on animal first aid, ensuring that every handler and volunteer could stabilize hypothermic or injured creatures until veterinary care arrived. Weeks of planning culminated in a community fair held in the town square, where interactive demonstrations showed families how to build makeshift shelters and keep pets safe during power outages. The event brimmed with laughter, shared stories of past rescues, and the unveiling of a bronze plaque honoring every canine partner who had served Under the glow of lanterns, Mark and Rex stood quietly to watch children clasp paper lanterns adorned with pup rints, each flame symbolizing a life saved. Back at the station, life settled into a new cadence. Morning briefing now included an animal care update, where officers shared reports on foster placements and budding adoption matches. Mark championed a policy requiring officers on patrol during winter months to carry emergency pet kits, thermal wraps, collapsible water bowls, and high-energy biscuits. He trained rookie officers in the subtleties of canine body language so they could detect distress signals that might elude untrained eyes. In doing so, he honored the lessons carved by the Blizzard rescue, that vigilance and compassion must walk hand in hand. Each time Rex hopped into the cruiser, harness gleaming under the dashboard light, Mark felt gratitude for the dog's unwavering partnership, a bond that had taught him to lead with empathy and to trust in the silent languages of animal hearts. On a cool evening, months after the storm, Mark received an invitation to the foster home of Jasper's primary caregiver. He arrived to find Jasper bounding into a sunlit yard where Branch, a daughter of one of the town's founding families, beamed as she held a worn tennis ball. Jasper leaped and caught it midair, tail thundering against the ground. Nearby, the puppies, now healthy and robust, frolicked with neighborhood pups, weaving in and out of autumn leaves. Branch offered Mark and Rex hot cider and invited them to join in the game. As the sun dipped behind the hills, painting the sky in hues of amber and rose, Mark observed the seamless integration of these once-lost souls into community life. In their joy, he heard the final note of the rescue's symphony, a triumphant chord that resonated in every heartbeat present. That night, as Mark sat at his desk reviewing incident reports, he paused before typing an executive summary. Instead of beginning with statistics, he drafted a personal narrative, the story of a weak bark heard through a blizzard, of two partners who refused to abandon hope, and of a community galvanized by compassion. He attached photographs: Jasper's first moments by the heater, the puppy's tentative first steps, children reading aloud to their new friends. His report concluded not with formal recommendations but with an open invitation to join the ongoing mission of listening for every bark, tending to every need, and forging bonds that traverse fear and despair. Before turning off the desk lamp, Mark crossed the room to Rex's kennel. The dog rose sleepily, eyes warm with recognition. Mark knelt and ran his fingers through Rex's fur, reflecting on the journey they had traveled from academy drills to life rescue, from the storm's cruelty to the warm glow of renewal. He whispered, not for protocol but for the bond that bound them, "Thank you for leading me when I could not see the way." Rex leaned into the touch, offering his own silent benediction of devotion. In that exchange, Mark knew their story would continue to unfold in every rescue yet to come. Every life saved, and every heart opened to the quiet voice of an animal in need. As the seasons turn, Officer Hayes and Rex guide their rescued companions into lives of joy and security, yet the true challenge lies ahead, sustaining a culture where every weak bark finds a compassionate listener, and every vulnerable soul discovers a place to call home.